You know that feeling when something goes wrong? What's the first thing we do? A lot of the time, our first impulse is to point a finger, either at someone else or maybe even at ourselves. It's this painful, frustrating cycle. So today we're going to break down the psychology behind blame and figure out how to get to a much better place, understanding.
We've all been there, right? That sinking feeling in your stomach after a mistake, a big argument, or an accident. And there's always that one question that just plays on a loop in your head.
So let's look at a real-world example. Imagine being in a car accident. The immediate, just gut punch of a thought is, this is entirely my fault. I couldn't concentrate. This is a classic case of self-blame, where we just pull the entire weight of what happened onto our own shoulders.
And just how much blame are we talking about? Well, the initial feeling was 99%. Think about that for a second. That's a huge, crushing weight to put on yourself. It basically leaves zero room for anything else that might have been going on.
So, what do we call this whole dynamic? Well, it's pretty simple. We call it the blame game. And it's something we all play, a lot of the time without even knowing it.
Okay, so why do we do this? Why is our brain's default setting so often to just jump straight to blame? If we're going to break this cycle, we've got to get under the hood and understand the psychology of it. What is actually going on in there?
All right, one of the big ideas here is something called projection. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like an old school movie projector. Our brain takes these feelings we don't like, guilt, insecurity, maybe feeling like we're not good enough, and instead of dealing with them, it shines them onto someone else. So suddenly it's not us who's disorganized, it's them. It's a really sneaky, unconscious defense mechanism our mind uses to protect us from feeling bad.
And here's the thing, it's not just in our own heads. As the critic Lionel Trilling said, our culture actually kind of celebrates blaming. We act like it's a sign that you're smart, that you have high moral standards. And when we reward it like that, is it any wonder we do it so much?
This whole tendency to blame is tied to a really core idea in psychology called your locus of control. It sounds a little technical, but it's actually super simple. It just means, where do you believe control comes from? Do you think you're in the driver's seat of your life, or is it outside forces?
Now, this isn't a simple on or off switch. It's more like a spectrum. On one end, you've got an internal locus of control. That's the I make things happen mindset. You believe you're responsible for your own successes and failures. On the other end, you have an external locus of control. This is the things happen to me mindset. People with a strong external locus of control are way more likely to blame things like luck, fate, or, you guessed it, other people when things go wrong.
But hang on, here's the really important part. Neither extreme is good for you. Blaming everyone else for everything is obviously a problem, but taking on all the responsibility, that total 100% internalization, that 99% self-blame we talked about earlier, that can be just as toxic. It's a fast track to feelings of shame, depression, and just constant anxiety.
So, if being on either end of the spectrum is unhealthy, where does that leave us? Well, it means we need to find the middle ground.
And that sweet spot in the middle, it has a name: accountability. Now, this is super different from blame. Accountability is about looking at a situation with clear eyes and just honestly understanding what your part in it was. Not taking on more than your share and not taking on less. It's that perfect balance.
So if accountability is the goal, why is it so darn hard to do? Well, because blaming, it works, at least in the short term. It gives us a payoff. It lets us feel right by making someone else wrong. It helps us dodge responsibility. It gives us an outlet for anger or frustration. And maybe most importantly, it gives us this illusion of being in control. It's a powerful emotional shortcut, and that's why we take it.
So how do we get off this merry-go-round? The first, most important, non-negotiable step is just self-awareness. It's about catching yourself in the act. The moment you start to feel that blame reflex kick in, just asking yourself, wait, why am I doing this? What am I trying to avoid feeling right now? That moment of recognition can change everything.
Okay, being self-aware is great, but what can you actually do in the moment to shift your perspective? I'm so glad you asked. There's a fantastic practical tool for this, and we're going to call it slicing the responsibility pie. This actually comes from a type of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and it's a super simple 5-step process. First, you just write down your initial gut reaction, like it's 99% my fault. Then, step 2, you have to brainstorm every single thing that could have contributed, not just you. Then, you give each of those things a percentage. You can plot it out on a chart if you want, and then, the final magical step, you write out a new, more balanced belief based on what you just discovered.
Okay, so let's take this tool and go back to that car accident.
When we actually break it down, the picture looks totally different, right? Suddenly, the other driver speeding, that gets a huge 40% chunk. Other drivers tailgating, that's 20%. Then you've got poor visibility, icy roads, even my own difficulty concentrating only gets 10%. All of a sudden, that huge weight of blame is shared across all these different pieces.
And just look at the difference this makes. You go from this crushing belief, I am 99% to blame for the car accident, to a much more realistic one. My difficulty concentrating was just one of 7 different factors that contributed. That is a massive, massive shift. And listen, this isn't about making excuses. It's about getting an accurate and way healthier picture of reality.
So once we've got this new tool for seeing things more clearly, we can start to make a real choice in our everyday lives. We can actively choose understanding over blame.
A huge part of this comes down to the words we use, our language. So, instead of jumping to an accusation like, I can't believe you did that, what if you tried a question? Help me understand why you made that decision. Instead of the classic, it's all your fault, try something like, okay, here's how I see my role in this. What am I missing about yours? It seems so small, but these little linguistic shifts can take a conversation from a fight to a real collaboration.
All right, so let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. Number 1, blame is just a defense mechanism our brains use to avoid pain. 2, the goal isn't self-blame or other blame, it's that healthy middle ground of accountability. 3, when in doubt, use that responsibility pie tool to get some real perspective. And finally, actively choose the language of understanding over the language of blame.
So I'll leave you with this. The next time something goes sideways and you feel that hot, familiar urge to point a finger, either outwards or inwards, just take a breath and ask yourself this one simple question. Because that question, that's where the journey from blame to real understanding begins.